So at university, I was very familiar by the end of how I could take effective revision notes, but when I joined work, I was a bit lost as to how I could take meeting notes. I soon realized that there's so much material covered during these meetings that you can't realistically capture it all in writing. And so over time, I developed a structure to write effective meeting notes, and that's what I'm going to share in this video. I'll first talk through the structure that I use, and then towards the end of the video, talk about some key things to remember. When you first join as an analyst or as a consultant at a firm, you'll be expected to take good meeting notes by default, and that's because, in theory at least, it's a fairly easy task. So if you want to learn how I write effective meeting notes, keep on watching. So let's get into structure, and this structure I use for internal and external meetings with clients. So the first thing you want to put down is the date, and the reason for this is fairly obvious. Eventually you'll have a notepad full of meeting notes going back maybe 6 months, 8 months, whatever it might be. And if you want to refer back to a meeting which took place 2 months ago, or at the end of a specific month, you can quickly go back using the date and find the meeting notes that you're after. The second thing you want to put down is the attendees of the meeting, and generally you might have the names of these individuals beforehand from the meeting invite itself, or you might find it out in the meeting room. One thing I like to do if I find out the names of the individuals in the meeting room itself is write the names in a particular order, and that's writing the names down from left to right in relation to where they're sitting in respect to me. This helps me to refer to people by their first name when I do raise any points. So below the attendees, I like to write down a few things that I need to remember for the meeting. So for example, the individuals that are attending might have promised us a few documents or a bit of information ahead of the meeting, which I can follow up on, or I might have a few questions for the individuals in the meeting room. Or if I'm leading the meeting, it might be the agenda, so that I can then follow a certain structure for the meeting. And yes, you can remember some of these items or all of these items in your mind, but it's a dangerous game to play, and it only takes a minute to write down any questions you might have or any important pieces of information that you want to remember to bring up during the meeting. So after the things to remember, you get down to the meeting notes themselves. And when you're writing the meeting notes, if you can, write down the headers for different topics that are discussed, because it's much easier then afterwards to read through the meeting notes and to distinguish certain topics and clear paragraphs. So on top of any information I write down, there'll naturally be also actions that I have to write down as well. And to distinguish them in all my meeting notes, what I'll do is I'll use red pen and I'll write an A in the margin next to the actions so that I can easily identify it from all the other notes. Similarly, if any attendees during the meeting say that they're going to provide us with certain information or certain pieces of analysis, I'll write an F next to that meeting note so that I know that I need to follow up with that individual. Another thing that I like to do is to write down every single item that needs to be followed up on in an email and send it to the individual that said that they're going to provide us with that information or analysis, so that they've got a written confirmation of what needs to be provided as well. Because what happens sometimes is that the individual says that they'll provide you with certain information or analysis by a particular time, but they haven't written it down, and so they forget that they need to provide the analysis. And so it's a good reminder for them. Another type of information that I like to highlight in the meeting notes is whenever I have a thought on a particular topic, if I have any questions that need to be followed up on after the meeting, for example, I like to mark those down with a T in the margin next to those meeting notes. And so then I can reflect on those items after the meeting's done and take any actions if they're needed. So having all these markers in your meeting notes for actions, thoughts, follow-up items really makes the meeting notes clear, and so you can really digest them much more easily and effectively. So before I move on to talk about important things that you want to remember when writing meeting notes, I just wanted to pause and mention that I've teamed up with Financial Edge, which is an online provider of training for individuals that aspire to become investment bankers. And I've linked down in the description some free online courses that you can do with Financial Edge if you're interested. So one advice that I'd give you is to write down as much detail as you can. Naturally, you don't want to be in a position where you've skipped over one important piece of information and that's the only information that a partner has been asking you for. So write down as much as you possibly can. But as I mentioned before, sometimes it's not practical to write down literally everything that's been said in the meeting because there's a lot covered. So one trick that I use is to write down 2 or 3 phrases or 2 or 3 words from a particular sentence which remind me of what the exact piece of information was. So for example, it might be that some individual in a meeting says that their stock balance has reduced because of supply chain issues in the Far East. And in this case, I just write down stock supply chain Far East, and that'll remind me about what was actually said during the meeting when I go and read those meeting notes back. So that's just one shortcut I use, and maybe you can try that next time and let me know how it goes. So the next point I wanted to raise was the medium that I use to write down the meeting notes. And since working from home predominantly, I've been using OneNote a lot to write down my meeting notes, and I've really found them useful because naturally using a digital platform or digital medium, you can go back and refer to meeting notes from 1 or 2 years back, and you can find them very easily and very quickly. And you can even search for particular terms or particular phrases, particular individuals, names for example, and you can find these within milliseconds if you use shortcuts. So having a repository of all your meeting notes and not having to go back and look through pages and pages in particular notebooks is really useful. So I'm transitioning to using OneNote as much as I possibly can. And naturally you can use, or you can add in symbols in OneNote to signify any actions that come out or any items that you want to follow up on, any thoughts you have. I feel it certainly has the flexibility that I require when writing meeting notes. Another benefit naturally is by using OneNote, you don't need to type up a meeting note if you've written it on paper, which you previously had to do. And so you save a bit of time from that as well. One piece of advice I'd give is if you are in an in-person meeting, normally you'd be expected to write your meeting notes on pen and paper, because it is still a bit of a distraction to write meeting notes on a laptop, and you can't really build a connection with a client or with another individual if you're looking at your screen and typing up. So I think the majority of people still use pen and paper like I do when having an in-person meeting. And so the piece of advice is, as soon as the meeting is done, get the meeting notes down on your computer on OneNote, or if you need to send an email or if you need to include them in an email, write it up as soon as possible so that you can rely on your memory to fill any gaps that you might have in terms of items that you might have not written or information that you might have not written. So don't delay it for a day or two, because as the days go forward, naturally your memory of the meeting gets weaker, and so you might miss out on key pieces of information. So that's how I take effective meeting notes, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to learn more about what skills you need to become a financial analyst, click on the video on your screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.